Hello, welcome to my new YouTube channel. I am Dallisa Hocking, a fifth generation psychic medium, and I really love astrology. And
Mm.
so on today's episode, I am delighted to have Kira Sutherland on this episode. We are talking about medical astrology, Chiron. We're going to be covering things like ADHD and weight loss and
Mm.
wellness from a holistic perspective. So, Kira, I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about you and
Sure.
then we'll get going. So,
I'm
Kira
ready.
Sutherland is a highly experienced, award winning naturopath, nutritionist, herbalist, and medical astrologer living in Sydney, Australia. She divides her time between clinical practice and writing and lecturing on these subjects and is known for her vibrant, straightforward teaching style. I've seen her myself in action. She has lectured around the world and has over 30 years of clinical experience. I connected with Kira at NORWAC, which is an astrology conference in Washington State, just outside of Seattle. And you can find all about her work at astrologyofhealth.com and on social media at Astrology of Health. Kira,
Keeping it
thank you.
simple. So good to see you, Dallisa.
It's good to have you here. Medical astrology is not something that
Mm-mm.
I've seen a lot of content on. I don't think I've ever talked to an astrologer that does this specific type of work. So I'm delighted that you're spending time
Yay.
with us today. And so let me just ask you first, like, how did you get started with medical astrology?
Oh, sure. So always into astrology, as many astrologers kind of fall into it in childhood. But when I was in my early 20s studying naturopathy in Sydney, let me also qualify for North Americans. A naturopath in Australia is an undergraduate science degree, not postgrad. My postgrad then came in other studies, but just to qualify that. So studying naturopathy, a lot of philosophy, a lot of history of medicine, and people were finishing and they were off studying like traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda because they were looking for like these systems to look at the body through. And I was lucky enough to be studying astrology just for fun at the same time, formally for my first time. And I realized there was a whole thing to do with body astrology and linking the signs and the planets to physiology. And if you go back in medicine, it's actually part of history. Like medicine used to use more of an energetic overlay to assess the body. And we kind of got rid of it about 350 years ago, 400 years ago. And so it was like this real moment for me that we had this tool to assess what was going on a different level using the elements and hot and cold. And yeah, it was just amazing when I found it. So that was I'm 29 years. I probably shouldn't say 30 yet. So I've been doing it ever since, slowly teaching it to myself. This is pre-internet. So books, and I couldn't find a teacher at the time that really did medical. So it's kind of evolved on its own. Obviously, there are amazing medical astrology teachers, but yeah, it found me in my very early 20s.
Love that. And this is such evergreen content that it will live on for decades. And so you'll
Yeah,
definitely surpass the 30 years.
yeah.
Yeah, with people really, I feel like finding you and finding your work,
Oh,
especially because you've been such a trailblazer when it comes
yeah.
to medical astrology. So I know you're going to inspire people by what's
Ah,
shared today and
thank
what's shared,
you.
as your journey continues to unfold.
Ah,
I know that part of your work is with Chiron. And
mm,
so there are folks in my audience that maybe they've heard about Chiron, maybe they have no idea what we're talking about. So
that's right. We can
can you
explain
tell them
it.
who Chiron is, what it is,
Yeah,
and why you work with that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So also to qualify for those that don't do a lot of astrology, um, there's a lot of different veins to astrology. There's psychological, there's like evolutionary astrology, there's medical, there's what we call traditional astrology, which all astrology really comes from traditional. But astrology has evolved, and like we have, originally astrology only used the 7 visible planets out to Saturn. And then with telescopes and calculations, we know there's these further outer planets. And so I practice a combination of both traditional and modern. So I have to qualify this for the astrologers. I do use the outer planets, and I do use what are called asteroids. So smaller bodies out in our universe. So Chiron is an asteroid, or sometimes gets qualified as a planetoid. So it's a little bit bigger than an asteroid, but not big enough to be called a planet. And it sits between, I'm at 6:30 in the morning, so my brain's waking up. It sits between Saturn, which is our last visible planet, and Uranus, which is the first non-visible planet by the naked eye. And Chiron was found in 1977. And it is, oh gosh, the story of Chiron is mythology, right? Chiron is a centaur, so half man, half horse. And he was, oh my gosh, the short version of Chiron. Chiron was abandoned by his parents and raised by somebody else, but Chiron became the teacher of everybody else in Greek mythology. He taught battle and he taught strategy, he taught music, but he also taught medicine. And because his mentor was kind of in charge of medicine as well. So Chiron is like the mentor's mentor, is how I like to think of him. Oh my gosh, where do I go with this?
We typically hear that he's like this wounded
Yeah,
healer,
wounded healer. Yeah.
is like kind of what I hear in
Yeah. So
mainstream
what was going on with
astrology.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's this incredible teacher. And then, I mean, there's multiple stories about what happened, but the short part is he was hit in the leg by a poison arrow of one of his mentees, and it created a wound that would have killed a mortal, but because he's immortal, he's born of gods, he can't die, but he's in excruciating pain. And here we have the guy who's teaching healing and medicine can't heal himself, and he's in extreme pain. And so, there's a lot of different parts of the story where he becomes an even greater healer in trying to heal himself, but he already was a great healer. He ends up making a deal with Zeus because he can't get out of pain, where he actually surrenders his immortality to help somebody else move out of pain, Prometheus. And so then he actually passes away. So there's this whole mythology about Chiron of, well, we call him the wounded healer because he has this wound he could never heal. But in trying to work on that, he becomes even wiser. But if you go further into the story, it's much more about surrendering parts of yourself for, oh my gosh, my brain's not even waking up on this. I teach this all the time. So it's about surrendering and the acceptance of who we are in this moment, faults and all. And it's a lot about acceptance of our woundedness, no matter what's happened to us. And in that acceptance, we move to those next levels. I mean, he moved to becoming a constellation, but as humans, it's not about dying. For us, it's about moving to another level, kind of spiritually or emotionally, physically.
Oh,
Did that make sense?
it did. Yeah, no,
My
it really
6:30 in the
does.
morning explanation. And do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it
So,
reminds me of, things I've read or even in doing client sessions where I look at someone's energy, and often someone who has some kind of dis-ease in the body,
mm,
I find it connected to some kind of energy root or some kind of emotion that hasn't been healed. And
yeah.
so Do you
Yeah.
then look at someone's chart and see where Chiron is, both natally and where it's transiting, to see what could be happening in the body?
Yeah, yeah. Just to add on to what you just said, because it reminds me what I didn't say. We look at Chiron in a chart, um, and we often talk about, oh, that's a wounding that you experienced in childhood, but other people will be like, no, it's a wound you brought in with, I don't want to say karmically, but just a wound you made a deal with to bring in and work on in this lifetime. I'm not always about it has to be a wound from childhood. It's just, it's a it's a sore point, literally, that we need to work on in this lifetime, no matter where it came from. So yes, I look at Chiron in somebody's natal chart. So yeah, when you look up your own chart, Chiron, just for those who don't know, looks like a K with a little circle at the bottom of it. So it kind of looks like a key, which is quite interesting in itself. Um, and it also looks a little bit like the disability symbol we use in a lot of countries that, like for, when you go to a parking spot and it's labeling, disability parking, it actually is almost an identical symbol. And that symbol was started in use in the US the same year we found Chiron, which is another interesting thing in it. The correlations of when we find things in the universe, in the sky, and what's going on often synthesize into the meaning we give things. So I look at Chiron in someone's natal chart, and then I also look at where Chiron is in the universe and how it's colliding, or what we call transiting. It's triggering different things in people's charts. And a lot of people hear about Chiron return, which means Chiron has gone all the way around somebody's natal chart and it's returning to where it was when you were born, which happens at about the age of 50. Some people a little bit earlier, some people 52. Yeah. So I look at all of those. Yes.
Have you noticed that the different transits, whether it's a return or an opposition, or different transits that happen in the transiting versus natal chart, do you find that some specific transits point to some specific kind of ailment or something that may
Yeah.
be coming up? So like, is an opposition different than like a conjunction?
Yeah, I definitely notice conjunctions more than anything else, because I think then when a conjunction happens, it's really happening to you. Whereas with oppositions, often that's because an opposition is 180 degrees across the wheel. Often it's an outside influence triggering onto you. Whereas the conjunctions, it's like it's a whole, yeah, I find it more embodied when it's a conjunction, definitely. But depends on that story or how we're integrating things, definitely. And Chiron Chiron issues can be emotional, spiritual, psychological, but also physical. But it's not always physical. So I don't want people to be scared. Oh my God, something's going to happen to me physically. But caveat, I do find if we're not, when a transit happens, it's basically the universe inviting you to work on something and integrate something or learn something about yourself. And if we are ignoring things about ourselves that it's time to be working on, Chiron often will trigger situations, especially by transit, physically, where we kind of have to stop and work on something with ourselves physically. But it's not always physical, but yeah, I do often see it physically. Yeah.
I love this conversation so much. Okay, so how long does Chiron spend in a sign?
So yeah, Chiron has a very elliptical orbit, right? So it's not circular, it's elliptical. So it spends up to 7 years in a sign, but that happens more with like Aries and Pisces, the signs around there, whereas it's much faster through other signs. Will be like 2 years in a sign, so 2.5, 3 years. So it can be very different. And right now, it's in Aries, and it's one of the places that spends a very long time, which is an interesting thing in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So people that look up their natal chart,
Hmm.
they can look to see where Chiron is, that little key symbol. And if it
Yeah.
happens to be in Aries, that could mean at some point over these next 7 years or so that they will have that conjunction
Yes.
where the
Yeah. Chiron
transiting will meet
return.
up. Yep, the
Yeah.
Chiron return. So then what's directly opposite of Aries that could trigger the opposition of transiting
Libra. Yeah.
Libra?
So Libra is
So
the
yeah,
opposite sign. So
yep.
I would have to look up in a book when it was in Libra. But yeah, if people get online like astro.com, I think Chiron automatically comes up when you're looking at your chart, or you can add it in as it'd be really easy to add in. It's usually, yeah, it's often used, except for the traditional astrologers don't use it. Yeah.
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 So folks that have in their natal chart Chiron and Libra, then they will experience the Chiron opposition for transiting Chiron that's going
Yeah.
through Aries. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's opposite. Or those with it in Capricorn or Cancer, it's considered square or at 90 degrees right now. Because, right, it's like a piece of, it's a puzzle, like a pie, right? So, but yeah, the ones, Chiron opposition, does it, so you're about 25 years old when that's happening, 25, 27. Um, which is a real adjustment, and Chiron opposition is basically happening before we're getting, everyone talks about Saturn return at 28, 29, right? And just for your listeners, if they're not that into astrology, but almost everyone's heard of Saturn return. Saturn return is actually when we deem you an adult astrologically. You're not an adult in your 20s. You think you are, like you're doing adult stuff, but once you get past Saturn return, you're like, I get it, right? The 20s is like it's there for the mistakes and the figuring out and the direction, and you don't have to know where you're going. And yeah, 28, 29 is that real adjusting into yourself. So there's some big stuff that happens in the few years before that. And I think that kind of preps us for that Saturn return. So yeah, Chiron return, Chiron opposition happens. And then we have what's also known as your lunar phase return, which is another conversation itself.
Wow. Yeah. Astrology is
Yeah.
is so deep and there's so many things to look at with it, but
Yeah.
it's
It's like cycle upon cycle upon cycle, right?
yeah. And you mentioned I think Capricorn and Cancer that would have a square
Yeah.
to where Chiron is now in Aries. So what kind of energy does a square bring up with
Yeah.
Chiron?
Squares are more like a friction or a slight adjustment. It's like, you get drawn to it's tension, but it's like a smaller adjustment to an opposition or a square. So it's like there's a trigger and we need to adjust, but it doesn't tend to be as big or as long as the square, the opposition or the conjunction. Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
The
Because some people
vision,
might,
the visual I
yeah.
get is like walking with a shoe that's slowly causing you a blister, and you got to get the shoe that I don't know why that visual pops up. The square is like that. It's like, okay, I got to fix this, but it's not huge. Whereas that conjunction is big. The age of 50 or 48, 49, 51, and Chiron return is not fast, right? It takes at least a year because from where we are on Earth, it looks like things are going forwards and then backwards and forwards. So it kind of goes over and re-triggers your spot. And I think a lot of people don't understand in astrology, people that don't do a lot of astrology, the first hit is like you've jumped into the pool and then you got to make some adjustments to your new environment. And if then when it goes back over it again, it's a readjustment. But if you've been making headway, the adjustment's not as hard. And then the third time it goes over, it's like a lot of the lesson comes with it. But if you're ignoring it, because we are good at that, it's easy to ignore when things are painful, right? We don't want to deal with it. Or, Chiron is very much about an internal processing. Um, that and an internal accepting of our wounds. Yes, it can manifest physically, but there's this surrender to the situation that goes on. And then in accepting that situation, the brilliance comes about, or that's such a bigger, I mean, I'm making it sound really horrible, but in that acceptance of who you are, faults and all, or whatever's going on, there's incredible power and genius when we're kinder to ourselves about it. Yeah. I think that's the
Mm,
real gift of it, right?
yeah, yeah. In a separate conversation that you and I had, you'd
Yeah.
mentioned that Chiron and Aries can be associated with things like ADHD.
Yeah.
So, why is ADHD connected to Chiron and Aries?
Yeah. So let me qualify. Just because you have Chiron, not you, but anybody listening, if you have Chiron and Aries, I'm not saying you have ADHD. What we were talking about when you heard a lecture was ADHD diagnosis at the moment is like everywhere. It's booming and not in a bad way. It's like it's been brought to our forefront. So, in medical astrology, where we assign body parts to different astrological signs, Aries rules everything to do with the head. So, brain, the whole face, anything from like the jaw upwards gets under Aries rulership. Although there's crossovers, like the planet Mercury actually rules the mind and the nervous system. So there's crossovers. But you heard me, or we talked about the idea that, because the Aries, Chiron's been in Aries for a couple years already. It's a little more than halfway through right now. And it's fabulous that all of a sudden all this mental health, not just ADHD, but mental health is in the forefront, be it anxiety, being people on the spectrum, which is about how your brain is wired. And I love that we're all looking at ourselves and our individuality of how our brain works, and it's at the forefront now, and people are a lot more, some people are a lot more accepting of it, other people aren't. So I think it's just this beautiful, which is astrology, synchronistic, hey, let's look at how our brain wires and notice that just because it's wired differently or processes differently, it's not good or bad. It just is. And we've got this revolution at the moment going on, especially in ADHD diagnosis for females, because females haven't been for, decades, we've only thought of ADHD as a male or assigned male at birth ailment. And it turns out women or females have it as frequently as males, but we internalize it and mask the symptoms differently. And all of a sudden that's getting revealed. And there's all these, this is what we were talking about. There's all these, especially women getting diagnosed that are like all these things about myself that I thought were broken, that I blamed myself for. This is very Chiron. All these things I thought were weaknesses or faults are actually just genetic. And let me be clear, ADHD is not caused by environment or bad parenting or bad foods. It could be made worse by nutrient deficiencies and stuff like that, but it's a genetic, it's inherited, we know it's a wiring thing, right? Just a processing thing. So, sorry, I've gone off on like 5 tangents as a good ADHDer would. um, so all these people are realizing they're not broken and they're not, yeah, these people have beaten up on themselves over all these traits that are actually just how they process and perform. And in realizing that, or in getting a diagnosis or assuming they have something, there's this deep grief over all the things they've been told are wrong with themselves over the years, or they've been criticized for. And there's a deep acceptance about who they are. Did that make sense? Did I explain that okay for you? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what if somebody pulls up their chart and they're like, well, I don't have Chiron in Aries, but I have these other planets that are in Aries. Do those other planets then also connect back to the head and different body parts that Aries rules?
Yeah. So, Aries is the head, Taurus is the kind of neck region, if you want me to do this. Gemini is like lungs, nervous system, arms, hands. Cancer is stomach and breast or chest area. Leo is heart and the kind of thoracic spine. You can get the idea we're moving down the body. What did I just do? Leo. Virgo is like solar plexus, small intestines, has a lot of nervous system stuff as well. Libra, lower lumbar back, kidneys, all things to do with balance. Scorpio, sexual reproductive parts and large intestines, detox. Sagittarius, bum or bottom, hip, thighs, liver. Capricorn, bones and skeleton and skin. Where am I? Aquarius. And knees. Everyone talks about the knees in Capricorn, but it's actually the whole skeleton and connective tissue. Aquarius is calves and ankles, circulation. And Pisces is feet and immune system. So depending on where you have planets, any planet in any sign you're not going to have ailments in every planet and every sign, but it brings an emphasis to whatever that planet is in charge of and whatever sign it is in. So it's like, the way I explain it to people is it's like your blueprint of what you incarnated with, strengths and weaknesses that you're going to experience. So we have our tendencies. It's never a guarantee that you're going to have a certain ailment or disease. That is not medical astrology. But it's where, you have more emphasis to learn about.
Mm, I love all of this so much. And I'm going to change the gears a little bit
Oh, I love it.
because
Go for it.
let's talk about weight loss when it comes
Mm,
to
'cause
medical astrology. How do you
no
see
one's
that
interested
show
in
up?
that.
No, nobody ever asks, how can I lose a few extra pounds?
No, never. So, oh my gosh. Yeah. So certain signs, every sign can gain weight and lose weight. Certain signs have more rulership or struggle because it's connected to the thyroid. So Taurus, every sign has their issues. Taurus rules the throat. So anything in this region, thyroid sits there, and thyroid is in charge of how fast you burn calories, your metabolism. And then Libra, Taurus and Libra every sign has a planet that's like its leader or it's in charge of, it's connected to. And Taurus and Libra share the planet Venus. And Venus is she's the goddess of love and beauty. And I always think of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. Like the minute I check in on Venus, that's the image I hold. And she's lush and round and sensual and she wants to be lying on a couch, listening to amazing music, staring at someone good looking, eating yummy food. Like she rules sugar, or carbohydrates. So Taurus and Libra can have these metabolism issues, but any sign, depending on where things are placed in the chart, there's a way to assess people's metabolism being fast or slow, depending on placements of planets. There's, the planet Jupiter is about abundance and good luck, but it's also rules body fat. So that's about abundance. And so Jupiter's not out exercising hard. Like Mars, the planet of war and exercise, is out there doing more. So there's all the planets have kind of symbolism connected to different body functions. So whereas Saturn rules restriction and control, so Saturn by placement can cause underfunctioning but it's also used for weight loss because if we use Saturn in its positive, it helps us be more restrictive and not go and, drink a bottle of wine or eat a box of Oreos or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
I
I just,
know.
when you describe Venus like that, I'm like, that's exactly how I see her too.
Yeah.
And I see myself like that. And I just want to lay around and eat Oreos.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm also a Sag sun ruled by Jupiter. So that kind of makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
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 I've
And
got
it's,
some body fat.
yeah. Yeah. And well, look, and let's also be real. We are supposed to have body fat, it's not, let's talk about I am jumping here, social media and illusion. The modern planet, Neptune is about dreams and intuition, but it's also about illusion and like things being mystical and cloudy. And I really see social media and advertising and all of that is a little bit Venus for the beauty, and it's a lot Neptune, this unrealistic ideal of, and what we're seeing is not real. And you know, I'm going to circle it back to Chiron, that acceptance of who we are in a different way and how we've all incarnate. We are all, I'm very into body types, right? Like genetically, you are born with what's known as a phenotype. It's your genetics, it's what we've inherited, it's our environment. We are all these amazing different shapes and sizes, yet through advertising and media, we're like, oh, this is what I need to look like. Or it's like, you know what? We all have different body types and different power within that body type. Some people are strength based, some people are better at, like, you look at the Olympic athletes, we just had the Olympics. The weightlifter that's genius at power versus, or that beautiful, amazing woman that's so in the media at the moment, Ilana, the rugby player.
Oh, I
Um,
don't know.
oh, there's this female American rugby player that like went wild during social media on the Olympics. And she's got this great, strong, amazing, but I think she's on Dancing with the Stars at the moment.
Okay.
And you look at her body versus the little gymnasts versus the Ethiopian amazing distance runners. There's beauty in all these bodies, but we have to find the beauty of what we're good at. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're totally accepting of somebody's height. Yeah. Oh, she's 5 foot tall. He's 6'5". We would never judge somebody's height, but we're so judgy on body type. I mean, yes, there is a point where you can gain enough weight, it's going to impact your health, but we don't all need to be supermodel thin either. Mm,
Yeah. I have Jupiter in my first house right now. And I had
yes.
heard a little rumor
By
from
transit,
another
you mean? By
by
transit.
transit.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
Jupiter is going through my first house.
Yeah.
And I heard a little rumor from another astrologer that if
Yes.
transiting Jupiter is going through your first house, it could expand you physically. Is that
Yes.
true?
Yes. Yes. So Jupiter is abundance and it rules body fat or growth, right? And so we do need to be, it's just and it's only, just to make you feel better, 1 year it goes through each house, right? Jupiter goes around the chart in 12 years. It's also a great time to expand who you are and what you're doing, right? So it'd be a great time to start things. And it's a very abundant time, potentially money wise and work wise, or expand your knowledge. It's a great time to study. But it's a time where you have to be cautious because all of a sudden your appetite can just get bigger. So yeah, Jupiter going through the first or the sixth, we have to be cautious. I'll be honest, I see what came with both. It's a great time to look at slightly lower carb, higher fat diets, because I'm not saying go into ketosis, but it's that kind of aligns with Jupiter's feel, is slightly more healthy fats, less carbohydrates. And it's a way to use that energy without it impacting you. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. Jupiter transiting the first has been expansive in so many ways. I just thought it was funny about the weight gain thing because it's
Yeah.
been rolling around in my head. So I
Oh,
thought I'd
yeah.
share that in case
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
else is getting ready or has transiting Jupiter.
And there's
But
nothing
yeah.
predestined like that. Like, it's not gonna make me gain weight or you. It's that I need to be aware of different ways to expand, like with my, studying a course or, yeah. And there's certain nutrients, and I don't want to prescribe nutrients for every human, but, making sure your pancreas is happy and your blood sugar levels. Jupiter is also the liver. So making sure your liver health is really supported. um, Jupiter doesn't like boundaries, right? Like Saturn is very boundaried strict, and Jupiter, the opposite planet, is the no boundaries. So it's also, yeah, it's like we go over the top. Jupiter is very jovial and celebratory, right? So like over drinking, overeating, but in celebration, that's where you just have to, yeah, keep yourself in line.
I laughed to myself because the other night I ate way too much ice cream and I was like, oh, it's Jupiter. So I'm gonna blame
Yeah.
Jupiter for my ice cream habit.
Yeah.
So I have to stop buying it because I
Yes.
know that if I buy it, it's all gone because there are no boundaries when it comes to ice cream. So
Yeah.
um
And I'm in the same position as you. I have a lot of Jupiter rulership to my chart, and I literally don't feel full very easily. And yeah, if I buy it, it's gone. My daughter even laughs about this. I literally do not purchase ice cream for that reason. Because if it's in my house, I will eat it. And because I'm Pisces rising, so that's ruled by Jupiter, and I'm a Sag moon ruled by Jupiter. So I have this double, and the moon is about how we feed ourselves. So, um, and I have this friend who's this Virgo, who's this, I go to her house and she has this big jug of lint balls, those yummy lint balls in her fridge. And I'm like, how do you have those in your fridge? Like, they were there a month ago and they're still there. She's like, oh, I just have one every now and then. And I'm like, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. And I go and I buy myself a jar of lint balls, and not one every week, one every time I walk by the fridge. Literally.
I
I
feel
will
you.
eat it in a day. I can't help it, right? It's just part of, yeah.
I feel that so deeply. Yeah.
Yes.
Do not buy it because it will be gone. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yes.
understand. Yeah, I have my moon in Pisces and sun in Sag. So yeah,
Okay, so
I'm
we've
like
got that.
you.
Yeah, you and
Yeah.
I are hanging out together we
Yeah.
should not be walking down the sweets aisle.
No, no. I have to stop. I have to stop. But I started ordering my groceries through an app and then just scheduling it for pickup. So then I don't even walk into the store, which
Mm.
helps to keep a little bit more of a boundary on
Yeah,
Jupiter.
yeah. I should do that, but I don't, because as a nutritionist, I'm always wandering around. And this is using Jupiter and education a bit. I'm wandering around reading labels and looking at all the latest stuff in the market because I have to be aware of what's out there for my clients. So I get a bit, I do try to avoid the sweets aisle at times, but a little bit of chocolate. But yeah, my daughter and I are very clear on how much we're allowed to bring. And my husband is take it or leave it with food. So yeah, I don't know
Oh,
how.
it's fascinating. I did see, and I'm going to include the link in the description below, that you have a free naturopathic astrology table that
Yes.
you're giving to folks. So, what would they use that chart for? Can you explain that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Oh, I could probably even grab it. It's usually right next to me. Oh, oh, here it is. Although the download is not that colorful. It's white because people complained it was too much to print in color. It goes through each sign, and it will describe its ruling body part, its temperature. It goes through organs that it's kind of, or systems it's in charge of. Just it's basically a chart I designed for myself 30 years ago when I was trying to teach myself medical astrology because I'm a really visual person. So I had to like write it out and look at it. It then goes through rulerships of minerals. It does have a section where it suggests foods or herbal medicines or different nutrients. That is not to go out and have all of those. Don't go and buy all of those. But it is suggestions of things that they often do well with. But obviously, if anybody is on medication, please never change what you're doing without checking with your primary healthcare practitioner. But it does give suggestions of things that can support them. So yeah, but the big thing is understanding, cancer is the stomach and the breasts, and it's water, so it's cold and what, like the temperature and things like that. So it's like a little cheat sheet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw them at Norwalk. You had
Yes.
them there. They're really
Probably the
incredible.
big
So,
version and the
huh?
little version. I had this big handwritten version, and when that was all I had, that is actually the original chart I created. I hand did it. And everyone's like, oh, you should type that up. And so I finally typed it up into a littler version. And everyone then goes, oh, but I like the big handwritten version better. Except the
It,
Virgos probably like the typed one.
it's an incredible resource. I appreciate
Mm.
you giving that to everybody
Yeah,
who is tuning into this. So, in closing,
sure.
what would be anything else that you feel you want to share with folks that are tuning in right now that maybe are a little bit stressed out, either emotionally or about their bodies or about their health? Like, is there a message you have to help empower them a bit more?
Ooh, such a big, you've given me a big option there. Astrologically, or just what I think we should all be working on?
Whatever you feel drawn
Yeah.
to. Yeah,
Do you know
like if
what?
somebody
Somehow,
comes to you and says,
yeah.
Kira, I am so stressed out because I have this medical thing going on and I'm in pain every day and I can't figure this out. What do you say to them?
Yeah, if I don't know why this is coming up, but I guess because it's free and we all need it, if, no matter what is going on with our body, the thing, two things are probably on. When we're having symptoms, when we're having ailments, it is our body asking us to slow down and focus. And I think we forget that, ailments or problems are symptoms. I like to think of, headache or stomach ache. That's your body giving you a little flag to slow down and pay more attention. And sometimes it does take ages to figure out why something's happening, or sometimes we can't figure it out. But just in that slowing down and focus, what is my body trying to tell me, or what am I doing that's exacerbating that? Maybe I need to reassess that. I just think that we forget our body is so smart and it's trying to tell us stuff, but instead we ignore it. And I'm not against painkillers or medication when you need it, but sometimes people are like, oh, I have this rash, I'll just put cortisone cream on it. And it's like, I lecture at university, and I was talking to a student about this the other day. She's like, oh, this person has eczema or eczema. I'll make them a herbal cream. And I said, yeah, that's lovely. That's going to soothe the symptom. But all skin stuff, not all, you can have contact dermatitis. The majority of skin stuff is coming from the inside, and that's the body flagging you with a symptom. But we actually need to look deeper. So I guess with all things and symptoms, what's the deeper? Go deeper. I think we forget to do that. My other thing that popped up. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with anything we've been talking about. But is sleep and circadian rhythms, right? We are this beautiful rhythmic being, no matter gender or sex. We all have rhythms. And sleep, though it can be hard for some people, is free. And if there's nothing else you can do for your health, getting enough quality sleep will help a lot of things function better. Sleep is when we detox, it's when we process things through the brain. It's our reset button every day. And I think we underestimate getting enough sleep. I don't know why that came
Mm.
up today, but it did.
Obviously, people needed to hear that
Yeah.
that we're tuning in. There are no accidents, especially when we're tuned in and we're listening to those
Mm.
intuitive hits that we get. I would suggest everybody listening go to Kira's website,
Mm,
astrologyofhealth.com, and on social media at Astrology of Health.
yes.
Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate your time, your talent, and
Oh,
for bringing all of this incredible information to us today. And just a reminder that in the description, I've included the link to grab Kira's chart that she put
yeah.
together. So make sure you grab that and you can keep that handy and share it with your friends and family as well. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always an honor for people to go, oh, come on my YouTube.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. So, well, thank you again, and
Sure.
we'll see everybody next time. Bye for now.